There's a silence that follows the stumble. You forget a name, misplace your keys, say something that comes out just a little off, and you brush it off. Stress, distraction, bad sleep. Nothing serious. But what if it is? What if that slip wasn't random? What if it was a signal, a soft whisper from the part of you that doesn't speak in full sentences, but in symbols and slips? Welcome to Guide to Reads, where we don't just explore books, we explore ourselves through them. And today, we're lying back on the proverbial couch with Sigmund Freud's The Psychopathology of Everyday Life, a book that invites us to look not at the grand decisions of life, but at the small, almost invisible missteps, and consider that they may be the most honest things we ever do. You call your boss by your ex's name. You accidentally forget your in-law's anniversary. You wake up humming a tune you haven't heard in years. These aren't flukes, Freud argues. They are fragments of truth, truths your unconscious mind smuggles into your waking life, not to sabotage you, but to be heard. At the heart of Freud's theory is one bold idea. The unconscious never sleeps. It's working in the background, shaping your choices, coloring your emotions, and, most tellingly, slipping into the cracks of your daily life when you're not watching. A forgotten name might reflect buried resentment. A slip of the tongue could be a wish peeking through repression. Even misplacing your glasses might tell a story, if you're willing to listen. And here's the powerful part. You don't need a degree in psychology to start noticing. You just need curiosity, awareness, a willingness to stop brushing off the minor and start seeing it as meaningful. In this episode, we'll walk through Freud's most intriguing insights. How mistakes are messages, why forgetfulness is rarely neutral, how slips of the tongue speak hidden truths, and how simply paying attention can unlock a deeper understanding of who you are. Because the real question isn't just, what did you forget? It's why. And what does that forgotten moment reveal about you? So if you're ready, not just to read a book, but to read yourself more clearly, let's begin. 1. On the trivial. It starts simply. You trip over a word. Place your phone in the fridge instead of the counter. Call your colleague by the wrong name, maybe even your ex's. You laugh, shrug. Maybe you blame it on not enough coffee, not enough sleep, or just a long day. Harmless, right? But Freud wouldn't smile so quickly. To him, these aren't innocent accidents. They're signals, tiny tremors on the surface of a much deeper sea. Freud believed there's no such thing as a truly trivial mistake. What you call a slip, he calls a clue. What feels like a momentary lapse may in fact be your unconscious leaving footprints in your waking life. Consider this. A young man recites Virgil, a poem he knows by heart. But suddenly, he forgets a single Latin word, aliquis. It seems minor. A mental blank. A nervous pause. But when Freud guides him through free association, that wandering path where words lead to memories, something strange begins to surface. Aliquis. Liquid. Blood. And then, without realizing, the young man begins to express anxiety about a possible pregnancy. Not his own, of course, but the possibility of someone else carrying the consequence of his action. That forgotten word? It wasn't random. It was a rebellion, a soft inner protest from a part of him that knew something he hadn't admitted yet. Freud saw these mistakes not as failures of memory, but as psychological compromises. One part of your mind is trying to speak, another part is trying to suppress, and what results is a stumble, a lapse, a misstep. But behind it, something real, something meaningful. These small errors tend to follow a pattern. They're brief. They come from familiar routines, names, words, habits, and they rarely come with an obvious emotional charge, which is precisely why we ignore them. But their lack of drama doesn't mean they lack depth. Because in the Freudian model, every slip has two layers: the manifest content, what happened, the forgotten name, the misplaced object, and the latent content, why it happened, the buried emotion, the unresolved fear, the quiet desire trying to get through. In this sense, your unconscious is clever. It doesn't shout. It whispers, through silence, through slips, through what's missing. So the next time you forget something you thought you knew, or say something you didn't mean to say, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what was trying to surface? What truth, however uncomfortable, might have borrowed your voice for a second. Because, as Freud teaches us, the most trivial mistake might just be the mind's most honest moment, and what we choose to dismiss could be the very thing we need to hear. 2. On the unconscious. Have you ever borrowed a book and somehow never gave it back? Forgot to forward that email again? Or found yourself humming a song you haven't heard in years, its lyrics suddenly echoing in your thoughts? These moments seem small, accidental. But what if they're not? What if they're subtle dispatches from a part of your mind that's always active, even when you're unaware? A part that doesn't ask your permission to speak. It just does. We call it the unconscious. And no one perhaps listened more carefully to that quiet voice than Freud. Freud's radical insight was simple but unsettling. We are not fully in control. Our waking mind, the one we think drives the ship, is often just the face on the figurehead. The real steering comes from below deck. Unacknowledged thoughts, buried emotions, unspoken conflicts. These aren't banished into nothingness. They live on, and they find their own ways of rising, not through dreams alone or sudden outbursts, but through the routine, the mundane, the everyday. Take that borrowed book you haven't returned. Maybe it's not about forgetfulness. Maybe, deep down, a part of you isn't ready to let go, not of the book, but of the relationship or what it symbolizes. Or consider that email thread you neglected to include your coworker on. Was it truly an oversight, or does that person stir something in you? Irritation, jealousy, unease, that you'd rather not acknowledge? Even our so-called clumsiness, Freud suggests, might not be entirely physical. Spilled salt, broken glasses, a missed step. We tell ourselves it's chance. But maybe it's tension surfacing, or guilt expressing itself in the language of matter. And then, there's the song, the tune that loops in your head like a forgotten incantation. Harmless, right? But listen. Really listen. What are the lyrics saying? Is it longing, defiance, fear? Your unconscious may have picked the track long before your conscious mind even noticed the melody. The beauty and the mystery of the unconscious is that it never rests. Even when we ignore it, it doesn't ignore us. It leaves its traces in everyday things. What we forget, what we avoid, what we repeat, what we sing. And these traces, they're not flaws in our mental machinery. They're messages, handwritten notes from the hidden self folded into the folds of our behavior. So the next time you skip a task for the third time, or your tongue picks a lyric without you knowing why, pause. Ask yourself, what part of me is trying to be heard? Because what Freud teaches us, and what life confirms again and again, is that meaning doesn't shout. It whispers. And if you learn to listen, you just might begin to understand yourself, from the inside out. 3. On forgetting. Let's go a little deeper into that all too familiar moment. You forgot something, an appointment, a name, a bill, a birthday. You might have even chuckled and muttered, "I'm losing my mind." But what if you're not? What if your mind knows exactly what it's doing? Freud invites us to consider a possibility that's as unsettling as it is revealing. That forgetting isn't failure. It's intention. It's not that the mind can't remember. It's that a part of you doesn't want to. You see, Freud believed that forgetting often serves a psychological function. Not everything you forget is the result of exhaustion, distraction, or too many browser tabs open in your brain. Sometimes forgetting is a strategy, a quiet, unconscious decision to avoid discomfort, to delay pain, to say without saying it, "Let's not deal with that right now." Take names, for instance. You meet someone, but later their name vanishes like smoke. Oddly enough, it's always that person, the one who stirred something in you: jealousy, anxiety, shame. You didn't forget their name by accident. You forgot it to create distance, to shield yourself, if only briefly, from what they represented. And maybe if you forget where they work or when you saw them last, that forgetting isn't about them at all. It's about you. Freud himself wasn't immune. He once noticed a recurring habit. He kept forgetting to pay his bills. At first glance, simple procrastination. But when he looked deeper, he found resentment toward a freeloading family member, toward the faceless government office demanding its due. His forgetfulness wasn't lazy, it was loud, it was a message wrapped in silence. And what about the favor you forgot to do? You promised, you meant to, but it slipped your mind. Yet somehow, not the other things. Not the errands or the emails or the to-do list on your fridge. Just that one request. And the person waiting? They get it. Because they know, as we all do, that we don't forget what we want to remember. We forget what we're avoiding. Freud adds a subtle twist to this. Sometimes the mind doesn't forget the source of pain directly. It forgets something nearby, an adjacent thought, a connected task, a symbol that brushes too close to the bruise, its misdirection, a sleight of hand not for deception, but for self-protection. So, the next time you forget something, pause. Is it truly carelessness? Or is it choreography? A delicate dance your unconscious is staging to protect you from something you haven't fully named yet. Because in Freud's world, forgetting is rarely forgetful. It's deliberate, disguised. A psychological safeguard stitched into your routine, trying to tell you, quietly, respectfully, that something deeper still needs your attention, and perhaps remembering that is the most important memory of all. 4. On slips. You open your mouth to say one thing, and out comes another. You meant bread and butter, but somehow it came out bed and butter. The moment is awkward. You laugh, apologize, maybe blush. It's just nerves, you say. A silly brain glitch. But what if it isn't? Freud would lean in here with a small knowing smile and say, that wasn't just a slip of the tongue. That was your unconscious borrowing your voice for a moment. These linguistic stumbles, accidental word swaps, strange misreadings, or curious phrasings aren't as random as they seem. They're tiny breaches in the wall of repression, little leaks where hidden thoughts slip out before the conscious mind can catch them. When you say bed instead of bread, perhaps your mind was elsewhere, wandering toward intimacy or longing. And when a simple phrase morphs into something emotionally loaded, Freud would say, pay attention. That wasn't an accident. That was a confession. And it's not just speech. These Freudian slips sneak into the way we read, write, even sign our names. A woman keeps misreading particularly pretty as particularly petty. The words are similar. The mistake is subtle, but the tone is sharp. Could it be that resentment lies beneath the surface, unspoken but simmering? Or take those odd familial mix-ups, calling your husband by your brother's name, referring to your aunt as your mother, easy to dismiss as name confusion, until you ask yourself, what emotions am I transferring? What roles are blending in my mind? Behind every mix-up, Freud suggests, there might be a map of unresolved feelings, a quiet drama playing out backstage. Even silence can be a slip, an unsigned check, a forgotten line on a contract, a missed word in a critical message. You might say, I just forgot. But the mind rarely forgets without reason. Perhaps deep down, a part of you didn't want to comply, to agree, to give. We often chalk these things up to phonetics, exhaustion, or stress, and certainly the conscious mind loves a logical explanation. It's safer that way. But Freud presses us to look closer, to ask not just what went wrong, but why that particular word at that particular moment. Why that name? Why that phrase? Why now? Because every slip is a signal, not from the surface, but from the deep, where truths we don't say begin to speak. So the next time your tongue betrays you, don't rush to brush it off. Listen, what part of you is reaching through the crack? What thought has waited for just that moment to rise? Because in Freud's world, mistakes in language are rarely meaningless. They are small, elegant rebellions, the unconscious nudging its way into your everyday voice. And if you're willing to pay attention, they'll tell you what your conscious mind isn't ready to say. 5. Self-observation, a psychological superpower. So far, we've looked at how the mind speaks in forgettings, slips, and so-called mistakes. But here's the most empowering part of all this. You don't need a couch, you don't need a clinic, and you don't need Freud sitting across from you, pen in hand. All you need is attention. Curious, quiet, intentional attention, because one of the most powerful psychological tools we have isn't buried deep in a textbook. It's within us, waiting to be used. Self-observation. Freud's most radical idea wasn't just that our unconscious speaks, but that we can learn to hear it. And he didn't just theorize it, he practiced it. He turned the lens inward, analyzing his own slips, his own lapses, his own avoidances. He treated every moment not as random, but as rich. Every forgotten name, every delayed task, every linguistic twist, a clue, not a coincidence. And you can do the same. Start with curiosity. You keep forgetting to call someone back. Why? Is it just busyness? Or is there something about that conversation you don't want to have? Maybe it's not forgetfulness at all, but resistance dressed in silence. You mix up names. You skip words while reading. You leave out a signature without realizing it. These aren't just quirks. They might be shields, tiny psychological shields, protecting you from an emotion you haven't fully named. We're actually good at spotting this in others. You've probably said it before. If it really mattered to them, they wouldn't have forgotten. We read between the lines of other people's behavior all the time. Now imagine turning that same perceptiveness inward, not with judgment, but with gentle awareness. Because that's where insight begins. Not in crisis, not in dramatic moments, but in the quiet, ordinary patterns of your day. Freud's theory reminds us, nothing in the mind is meaningless. Even the smallest lapse might carry the largest truth. The unconscious doesn't always shout. Sometimes it slips, forgets, hesitates, or rewrites a sentence mid-thought. And if you pay attention, you can begin to hear what it's trying to say. But let's be clear. Self-observation is not self-interrogation. It's not about obsessing over every move or over-analyzing every breath. It's about pausing, just briefly, when something strange happens, and asking, what might this moment mean? Even the most ordinary moment might carry a revelation, because the psyche doesn't need big stages to perform. It dances in the details, and when you begin to notice, you'll find something quietly extraordinary, that you've been leaving messages for yourself all along. Final summary. As we come to the close of today's journey into Freud's Psychopathology of Everyday Life, let's pause and reflect. What we've discovered is simple yet profound. Your smallest mistakes, those slips, forgettings, and missteps, are far from meaningless. They are the secret language of your unconscious, whispering truths that your conscious mind might not yet be ready to face. Each forgotten name, every misplaced word, each avoided task, is an invitation to listen more closely, to observe with kindness, and to meet yourself not just where you want to be, but where you truly are. Remember, this journey is not about judgment, it's about curiosity. It's about reclaiming a power you already hold, the power to understand yourself from the inside out. And the best part, you don't need a special key, you only need to pay attention, to honor your slips and stumbles as guides, not enemies. If today's exploration sparked something in you, if it nudged your mind to listen more carefully to your own daily life, then I invite you to take this moment beyond the podcast. Notice one small slip tomorrow. Ask yourself what it might mean, and when you do, you'll begin to read yourself as richly as you read any book. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe to Guide to Reads. Like and share this journey with those you think will listen with an open mind. Together, let's keep uncovering the hidden stories in the books we read and in the lives we live. Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep reading and keep listening.